Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. If you're joining us live now on any one of the 4 social media platforms that we are broadcasting this episode on, please do me a favor and, well, a couple actually. Share this out to your network. Let's see if we can get some more people in here joining the conversation. And also don't forget to smash that like button on, on most platforms you can do that. And comment. Feel free to comment. If I bring something up that resonates with you or makes you consider a question or thought, comment, or concern, add it to the comments on the platform that you're viewing this on, and I will try to incorporate that into our discussion. I want to start off today's discussion, our conversation, with a funny visual. And I've seen it in a bunch of movies, usually comedies that include families. Have you ever seen like a video or I don't know, comedy special or something where you see that obligatory older sibling using their little sister or little brother's hands to kind of smack themselves? Like, why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? I think it was, I want to say Dennis the Menace. One of those movies like that. It was a clear visual of the big older sibling was, grabbed the hands and wrists of the younger one and overpowered them and just started making them sort of smack themselves. And, the young ones there, powerless and kind of smacking themselves. And then the bully older brother or sister is asking over and over again, like, why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? Well, considering that visual, I want to get into how and why you have probably been conned into voting for the woke far left stuff. The diversity, equity, and inclusion, the environmental, social, and governance, the DEI is critical race theory rebranded. It's race baiting, race hustle is really all that it is, and it's just been rebranded as DEI. I'm more than happy to debate that if you think that that it's somehow some sort of good thing that's going to cure some social ills. I've got some countries to point you to, like Venezuela, Cuba, North Korea, and lots of places like it, Soviet Union, and places that have brought about these whole, we're going to cure these social ills with social justice. I'm air quoting that again, social justice, and we're going to fix it all. If only we give lots more power and money to the government, then the government's going to make everything all better. And then lo and behold, it just gets worse and worse. And that's what CRT DEI is. Anyway, I want to talk about something called proxy voting, and how it is that you and people you know and your friends and neighbors probably at various points have actually voted the stuff into existence. It's off radar for most, but let me start by saying that if you have investments anywhere, they have votes connected to them. That's our starting point. If you have an IRA account that invests in mutual funds or exchange traded funds or owns some stocks, or if you inherited stocks from mom or grandpa, or if you have a 401k plan, those mutual funds that you invest in, the shares of companies that you're buying, and that means all the companies, all publicly traded companies have a public process of going through selecting their board, making decisions about how they allocate money, etc. And we, the people, by investing in those companies, we acquire the right to vote. So it's weird. There's a kind of a disconnect in society. We think of people like Warren Buffett or Bill and Melinda Gates, who own trillions of shares, or I don't know, whatever, probably mostly all woke stuff. They go to this annual shareholders meeting, and some people actually pay attention to that and watch the shareholders meeting. Well, that has all sorts of fanfare, and it's almost like the award shows or something. There's like the red carpet, and people get out of limousines and everything, and that's very flashy. But on a regular, ongoing basis, with much more impact, way more impact than any George Soros or Bill Gates or any of them, these billionaires and these wealthy elites, as they consider themselves, we actually control way more money in aggregate than they do by many fold. And on a regular, small, recurring, ongoing basis, we're actually asked to vote on issues. We vote in the board of things like Target and Costco and places like it. If they're a publicly traded company, there's a public process to make decisions about how that company runs itself. I just happened to grab a stack here of these are what are referred to as proxy voting statements. This is not a recommendation. You can see that this top sheet actually pertains to ExxonMobil Corporation. I see tens of thousands of these. They actually kind of pepper the universe, kind of scattered all over the US and the world for people that own stocks in companies like this. And I think there's an easy concept for people if you own it directly in your portfolio. And that is a possibility for people, even inside of 401k plans. Hint, hint. Go back and watch the episodes where we talk about a self-directed brokerage account inside of your 401k plan. It's a way to build wealth without paying management fees. It's a little bit of a trade-off there. You will pay trading costs, which typically are very, very low. But if you build a stock portfolio, you don't have those ongoing management fees that erode from the value. That's a side note. But here's where people don't sort of connect the dots the way that I think they should. ExxonMobil, and again, this is not a recommendation to buy or sell ExxonMobil. I'm just using them as an example. And I've got a thick stack here of about 50 of these that I've just recently crossed my desk for the opportunity for me to chime in and weigh in with opinion. But these are actually inside of your IRA and 401k. They're inside. They're actually what's purchased by the mutual fund. So that mutual fund, let's say that your payroll comes around and you decide to deduct whatever, some number of dollars or a percentage of your wages, and it goes into your 401k plan. And that form that you filled out and you checked a few boxes, selecting a few different mutual funds. By the way, another side note on selecting the mutual funds. I encourage, generally speaking, no fewer than, let's say, 7 to 10 different mutual funds. I'm assuming that whoever created that menu for your company, for the 401k list of investment options, did a good job of selecting different types of investments, but properly diversify by selecting a range of different mutual funds that fit different but comparable investment objectives, investing some in US companies and some maybe in international companies, some in small companies, some in mid-sized companies, some in large companies, some invested in the equity or stock of companies, and some invested in what are called bonds that companies may issue. That mix is important because it kind of smooths the road. It should take out some of the peaks and valleys of your investment experience. Anyway, on the stocks side, what are called equity mutual funds, they're investing in companies. Those companies then, because you own shares in them indirectly, give you the opportunity to the opportunity to vote on how they conduct themselves. That means their board of directors and all kinds of things. And yes, it affects their leanings, their political leanings. Didn't used to be the case pretty much forever until, I want to say, about 10 years ago. Companies really get into politics. But now that politics has shown up via critical race theory, DEI, and this whole environmental, save the planet, climate change fiasco people, it asserted itself. We have politics now that have asserted themselves into the world of finance and affecting companies. Not to get too far into the weeds on that, but there is something called corporate equity index, which is kind of like a social credit score for corporations, which is both the stick and carrot that globalists use, the billionaires that exert that kind of influence, exert on companies, trying to force them to go left. We the people, both in the US and abroad, we can swing that pendulum back. We can counter the votes of the far left objective. So here's what that looks like. This gets a little bit complex, but it's kind of important to know. The reason that you're not getting these sheets of paper in the mail and given the opportunity to read about this and read what are the issues. So this one, again, this is an example. This is ExxonMobil, and I can see nominees for the election of directors. And then there are a couple of issues. This is the ratification of independent auditors and an advisory vote to approve executive compensation. That's a good one. What if you feel that the executive compensation of ExxonMobil is too high? You could vote against it if you knew this existed. What happens is this interesting little hidden world called proxy voting. So there are companies out there, their whole job is to vote on your behalf. That's where we're headed with today's discussion. Those companies out there, and there are three main ones, three very, very large ones that work on behalf of, supposedly, on behalf of we the people. The small investor who doesn't have the time, we're not the red carpet type. We're not going to go and fly to wherever the corporate headquarters is and do the 3-day gala with champagne and surf and turf and listen to the chairman and speakers and then fill out our ballot and vote. We're not going to vote that way. Most people don't. That's that Warren Buffett world that I alluded to earlier. And I think Warren Buffett, I think at his, I don't know how old he is, but I think he's still attending many of those, or he sends people on his behalf. But that, again, is not the world that we live in. The world we live in is under old normal circumstances, under different circumstances, we might get some of these. And let's say that you own one mutual fund. Again, I'm not recommending owning only one mutual fund, but if you are deciding to use mutual funds to do the investment management for you, then know that hidden underneath are a whole bunch of voting opportunities on a regular basis. Well, that mutual fund company, they don't want to vote on your behalf. And let's say you work with some Wall Street firm that then puts you in the mutual funds. They also don't want the responsibility and the time and research that goes into figuring out what's good, what's bad, who to vote for, and your opinion. So they all outsource. They outsource the votes to proxy voting facilities. Those proxy voting facilities vote billions and billions of votes on a regular, ongoing basis. So what happens when those proxy voting places get influenced or intimidated or taken over by the far left? That's where we are now. In my estimation, in my opinion, I've had this conversation many times, I'm going to caveat this by saying that there are some entities out there that are starting to fight back. They've seen the woke left political agenda asserting itself through proxy voting, and we've seen the result. When you look out there and you see these companies that have gone woke, remember the whole, if you're on social media, well, of course you are, because you're watching this show, you've seen that go woke, go broke mantra that sane, rational, reasonable people have attached to the ludicrous behavior of many of these companies. They've gone far left. The reason they went far left is a couplefold. It was allowed to happen because of a long series of years of voting further and further left. We've put board members in place. We've put policies in place. We've allowed these companies to drift incredibly far left. And that ultimately, it's kind of on us. We need to do a better job of being aware of the power and influence that our money has. And what do I mean by power and influence? Let's put some numbers to that. I said earlier that we can pay attention to, and we're often distracted by Bill Gates or George Soros or Elon Musk or Trump or whatever, and they have portfolios of some billions of dollars, or are arguably incredibly corrupt politicians who have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. Their portfolios are actually mostly all public information. We can see a lot of the trading that takes place. Well, they have votes, and those politicians, those people can see, they can steer the leanings of corporations toward the left. It benefits them politically. And they can also see the future actions of corporations, and they can put power into the hands of very few companies, where we, the people, would much rather see open, free market competition. All of it goes hand in glove. All of it goes to the manipulation and mass consolidation of markets to try to get to a point where there are very few companies. This is all related, and there are some very smart people doing very devious things behind the scenes. Well, again, as promised, I'm going to put some numbers to that. You can probably guess, think of your most infamous or famous multi-billionaire. Think of however many billions of dollars they have. US retirement dollars are an estimated $35.7 trillion. So that person, who may seem very largesse, with a $10 billion net worth, it's nothing. $10 billion is tiny compared to 35, almost $36 trillion that we, the people, control. That's where UnWoke Academy comes in. That's the message. That's the purpose. That's the drive behind UnWoke Academy. Remember the expression, diss the globalist left. Know where you donate, invest, and spend. And in today's conversation, I'm adding, know how you vote. Because if you have signed off on giving your voting rights to somebody else, which is almost a given, it's almost a certainty, know that there is a company out there that's voting on your behalf. And they overwhelmingly have leaned and moved society and business culture to the left. Yes, it's true that there are some companies that are coming out that are fighting back, and I'm reporting on them. I'm not only exposing the woke, progressive, far left, liberal voting habits of some of these proxy voting facilities, but I'm also out there scouring, interviewing, and talking to and reporting on the ones that are designing themselves to fight back. They're smaller, but they're growing, and they're going to grow bigger. And we fight back, and we swing that pendulum back, at least to neutral. Get back to neutral, for heaven's sakes. Let's do it. You can do it by contacting if you work with a broker or financial advisor or financial planner, and ask questions about the proxy voting facility. And if they say, in today's episode, I made a deal with myself. I'm not going to name the names in this one. It doesn't matter. Find the name of whoever it is, whatever the organization is that's doing the proxy voting on your behalf, and then go to unwoke.academy, or just look them up, do some searches, read about them. And if they're one of those, a few of them have actually dialed back some of their far left woke rhetoric on their websites, because now we're in the Trump era. We're in a Trump administration, and they don't want to be called out for it. As sane, rational, reasonable people fight back against the critical race theory, DEI, and environmental arm twisting and all that stuff. But you'll find out a lot. You'll find out how far left you're likely being voted on your behalf. Find out what the options are. If you're the type of person who's curious about this and interested, the first thing to know, as I mentioned before, is there is the option. There should be the option, or you can create the option, I should say, in your 401k plan, and certainly in your IRA and other types of investment accounts, to just simply bypass the managers and invest directly in the companies. You'll get the voting, or you may have good options on better places to direct and instruct proxy voting. But here's the key. When you go to whoever it is that manages your money, whatever financial institution your money is with, ask them what the options are. So in a series of conversations that I've had over the past, I want to say I started talking about proxy voting 2 years ago, I've highlighted some that I consider to be extremely far left woke in their voting track record with your money. I've also talked about some that I consider to be better alternatives. That is a landscape. I'm going to put all the information out there and help instruct people to make better choices. But just know this, if we leave it on autopilot, the default, at least for now, and definitely for the past 10 plus years, has been using your money and the voting power that comes with it to vote us further and further left. Your mission, our mission, the objective, the reason for this podcast is to encourage you to vote differently, either directly or find a better alternative for the proxy voting that's done on your behalf. Whatever the amount is, it all adds up. It's $35.7 trillion. And if you have retirement accounts anywhere, or investment accounts aren't even considered in that sum. So all in, who knows, we might be at $70 trillion of investable assets in the US. That's a lot of wealth. And if all that voting power, all that money, figure $35 to $70 trillion, is consistently voting in the very things we're trying to fight, the critical race theory, the DEI stuff, the environmental Green New Deal push, if you're voting for it, don't be surprised when it doesn't disappear. And as a result, speaking of these types of things, a compensation package for the people running these sorts of organizations, I read somewhere recently, I'm going to paraphrase, that the average compensation last year, 2024, average for the chairman of these companies that went woke was around $16 million. Can you imagine being paid $16 million to oversee the damage and harm to a company, allowing it to go woke and go broke? Just using as an example, Target. So Target some years ago were found to be introducing the LGBTQ plus rainbow onesies, and they had satanic symbols on some for children and toddlers. Well, the public created some outrage and backlash, and that stock price dropped. I want to say some reports had it at $13.8 billion in lost market capitalization. And if memory serves, I believe they closed some locations and laid off people. So what if Target and companies like that were harmed by the choices they made, but their chairman ended up with a $16 million bonus for it? And what if that all happened as a result of the collective non-action, allowing the further and further left proxy voting of our investment dollars? I believe that's the case, and I can prove it. That's my position. I'm Jonathan Broadbent. This has been another episode of UnWoke.Academy. I'm double checking to see if any comments have come in. If you do think of something, if you watch this in a replay, if a question occurs to you or you'd like additional information, or if any part of this was not clear, feel free to contact me via social media or at info@unwokeinvesting.com. Wherever you're doing your investing, I hope you go out there and take action, or at least just start asking questions. Thanks for listening.